Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Two Stewards Show. My name's Mark, and I'm here with Brent.
Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Brent. Wonderful to see you again.
So close.
Yes, we are sitting at the same side of the table this time. That's because we have a guest in studio, and our guest for today is Ian Koerssen. Welcome, Ian.
Thanks for having me.
And so, Ian, what brings you here?
Yeah, so I am...
Besides your car.
Sorry?
Besides your car.
Yeah, beats walking, I guess. So I am the Director of Design for Good Stewards. So I'm going to be taking over any of the design projects from start to finish. So that could be initial design concepts, pulling permits, keeping tabs on the construction, making sure that it goes from concept to finished product.
Okay, all right. So, hey, Brent, I should know this. But did you do all the design before?
Yeah.
Like that ADU we looked at. Who was that?
Yeah, I think a bunch of listeners came out to that tour. But yeah, so we have basically done design services by internally doing kind of the conceptual design, and then getting the BCIN part of this outsourced.
Right.
So this is a big step. And it's exciting. So we thought, hey, we bring Ian in and kind of share a little bit about who he is, where he came from, and talk a little bit about the design process, a little bit about like the qualifications necessary. He's a bit of a building code whiz. So when he talks, my eyes just kind of like, whoa, I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Somebody has to like it.
Yeah.
But how do we know we're going to get the same quality of design as we got before if you're not doing
It's not going to be the same. It's going to be better. Right?
No offense, Ian.
Yeah.
I don't know, right?
None taken.
Yeah. So the biggest thing with, I guess what sets our design services apart from just like getting a design done from just a designer, like we focus on the whole tenant process, right? Like finding a property that's suitable for rentals and then designing it to accommodate tenants.
Yeah.
So it's more of a tenant-centric approach. And then we have the experience in construction, building them, complying with the codes, and then renting them out, right? So it's kind of this full circle loop that adds a lot of value. So that experience kind of informs the design. So that will continue, and that's kind of our focus. And Ian's kind of been in the background for the last few jobs we've done, actually kind of learning the process and adding a ton of value already. So
yeah, okay. So you're just making the circle bigger.
Yeah.
Bigger and better circle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty soon you'll be in it, Mark.
We'll see. Trying to stay out of the crop circles. Okay.
We try not to talk about Good Stewards too much. We talk about Ian.
Okay, sure. Okay, BCIN. What is it? You mentioned you got to outsource the BCIN. Now you can insource it.
That doesn't mean anything to anybody.
Yeah. Let me ask Ian. I'm sick of listening to you. Ian, what's a BCIN?
Yeah, so in order to get a building permit in Ontario, your plans need to be prepared by somebody who's qualified. So that could be an architect, that could be an engineer. Typically, small residential projects don't require an architect or an engineer, but they do require a qualified designer. So BCIN stands for Building Code Identification Number. Essentially, what it means is you've passed a series of exams, you're registered and insured with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and you are qualified to submit plans for a building permit.
Okay. So does it... on the design side, I'm just thinking, okay, so you're qualified, et cetera, but does that really inform or does it show that you have a design, like, does it mean you're a good designer? That's trying to come up with the fancy way
I
to
can
say
tell you
that.
from experience, there are lots of BCIN qualified people who are terrible designers.
Yeah.
So it's not, BCIN it's more about the building code and the technical aspects of, like, the building code is concerned about fire safety, structural integrity, that kind of stuff. It has nothing to do with the function of a space, really. It doesn't have anything to do with, good design practices.
Yeah.
So you could have a BCIN designer that, sure, they might know the code, they've passed the exams for that, but the design is not necessarily tenant centric or all sorts of different different issues you could have.
Yeah. So what made you get into this field? Like, what came first, the BCIN or the design?
Well, if we go way back, it started with, Lego houses.
Let's do it.
I mean, and so when I was a kid, like, that's all I wanted to do is build. Like, I would take, an entire room and I would build like an entire city out of Lego.
Right.
And my cousins
To
and
code?
No.
That's a code. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if Lego blocks are an approved structural material yet.
They have the fire rated ones now.
Sure, yeah.
Have you seen the ones? I seen this guy. He built ancient Rome, or he's building.
Yeah, of course it's Rome with you.
What do you expect? No, but he did. He's got like the Colosseum. He's got like all the streets around. He's got the I can't remember what the lake was called, but that's in there too. Like, it's amazing. Okay. I mean, that doesn't require any
skill
building. No. There's no code. I don't think there was code in. I don't know. Was there code in ancient Rome? I bet there was. Okay, we're gonna have to do this on a future episode.
He studied the code.
Yeah,
did you study the codes for ancient Rome?
No.
Okay.
Just Ontario.
Okay. But anyways, okay. So you were interested in design as a kid.
Yeah. So
or building stuff, anyways.
Always knew that I kind of wanted to work with buildings to some degree. Obviously, when I was 3 years old, I didn't know what that would look like. But if you had asked anyone who saw me as a kid, they're like, "Oh, he's going to be an architect one day," right? So it was kind of just a well-known thing that I liked working with buildings. So fast forward, graduate high school, I went to Humber College and I studied architectural technology. During the summers, working construction, I did some framing. I did a lot of landscape construction, building decks, fences, retaining walls, that kind of thing. And then I
sounds like the path of a Dutch
of every Dutch person ever.
Yeah, pretty well. But that really solidified kind of my foot in the building industry. And then right out of school, I took a job actually in Hamilton. So it's kind of full circle being back here now. I took my first, sort of real job out of college. Was for an architectural firm in downtown Hamilton, and I worked there for 3.5 years. And then,
what kind of stuff were they designing? Like, the
they
firm span a whole bunch of different.
They primarily did a lot of like retrofit. So there's a lot of really nice buildings I can point out downtown Hamilton that are
that you had a hand in designing,
or either me or the firm that I worked for. But they did a lot of really nice stuff. So. Definitely worth checking out those buildings. And they would do anything from, a custom house to apartment buildings, 10, 12, 14 stories. So a couple of the projects that I was really involved in, one was a 75 unit apartment building on Main Street. And then another one was an industrial lab. So a lot of variety, kind of anything, but a lot of the sort of adaptive reuse projects.
And that's where you fell in love with the building code.
Right. Something like that.
This is where the love affair began.
Yeah.
Do you have kids, Ian?
I do not.
Oh, okay. So listen, if you do, this is the most wonderful thing that someone who's in the trades or involved with it can do is you drive around and just you point out to your kids, like, see that building? I worked on that. See that house? I designed that. Yeah. I do it all the time. See that place? Yeah, I did stuff
that
there.
With my wife. She's not impressed.
Your kids won't be either, but it's still it's just a thing you have to do as a dad.
So you actually do love the building code, or is that like kind of a?
I mean, I don't know if anyone loves the building code. Yeah. I appreciate it, certain aspects of it. I tend to like enjoy sort of the legal aspects of things, so like the building codes, regulations, different things like that. It sounds weird, but I enjoy reading them. So I guess that helps.
Well, I guess we need those kind of people too, Brent.
Yeah. He sends me emails and it's like, read this, and then I usually save those for just before I go to bed. Okay.
A bedtime story.
Yeah. But no, it is very important. I maybe speak to that too. Like, why is it necessary to have a building code? Like, maybe everybody knows this, but in your perspective, you've probably seen things go through and get permits come to your desk like, hey, I'm applying for this, and you're like, wait a minute, that is not gonna stand.
So just to back up a little bit, the part that we haven't touched on yet is as Brent alluded to, I'm also a municipal plans examiner. So I work for a local building department. reviewing building permit applications and checking for code compliance. So obviously the building code is a big part of my day-to-day function, both as a plans examiner and then now as a designer and in years past. Prior to working for the building department, I was probably like every other young Dutch guy who thought the building code was a waste of time. Building codes are a waste of time, that it's just like a hurdle you have to go through.
It's not just young Dutch people, by the way.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. What I didn't realize, so I had spent, all those years working for contractors. I worked for good contractors. Those years I worked for an architectural firm. I worked for a firm that knew what they were doing. Turns out that those, contractors who know what they're doing and designers that know what they're doing are few and far between. And so really the building code is kind of, it levels the playing field a little bit where, you are looking at, you want to buy a house or something. There's a certain expectation that people have that that house was built at least somewhat properly. Yeah. And the building code is really the only mechanism we have to enforce that. So in one sense, like, yeah, it's a nice idea if everyone can just do whatever they want. The reality is people expect a certain level from a house that they buy in Canada or a building that they walk into, whether that's structurally or being able to get out in terms of a fire or anything else.
Yeah.
Even some of the practical things like views to the outdoors, that's a building code requirement because it really affects you if you are in a dark dungeon all day versus somewhere you can actually see outside.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking the difference between, you mentioned the expectation people have when they buy something in Canada. Like Mark, when you're down in the States, like the building codes there vary quite a bit, and what are your expectations going down there? Like, are they a lot different than here?
I haven't really spent a lot of time pondering the intricacies of the building code in Tennessee versus Ontario.
Yeah. I've just seen, like, from my limited looking in the States too, like if they have less building code standards in some areas, like you do notice it in the quality of the houses all throughout communities, right?
Well, I mean, they have national codes that are enforced throughout, right? Yeah. Like as far as electrical and even low voltage, which I'm a little more knowledgeable in.
Yeah.
Whether there's actual enforcement or not is another question, right? And, side note, I should not invite Ian over to my house. Stay outside.
Actually, just stay on the driveway.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I don't know, have you compared, Ian, building codes like around the world or,
really.
Like Europe? I know I've had European relatives come while I was doing some renovations, and they're, I'm running just like electrical wire through the studs, doing it like stapling it and doing it properly. But they're like, wow, we have to run it in conduit.
Yeah.
Right. And like, they're also not used to timber frame building, but
that's a big part of it, right? Is the building codes are written based on, local construction practices. So timber construction in North America is going to be very different than European construction. So yeah, that's a really good example of that.
So I want to know, what does a plans examiner actually do? So like,
he examines plans, Brent. It's in the name.
Yeah. So my
like if I submit a drawing package to you, like the first thing you do is say wrong, like go back and redraw. Like, what do you actually do?
So my technical job title is building permit rejection officer.
See, this is the internal jokes they have at the city going like, how many their metrics are just like, how many permits rejected today?
We have a leaderboard at who's
look, guys, I got another one on a napkin.
Yeah. No. So, okay. First thing, we're going to take a look and, do you have all the drawings that you're supposed to have? That's probably honestly, one of the biggest problems is people will submit incomplete submissions or their drawings don't match each other. So like one drawing says one thing, the next one says the next thing.
Yeah.
So the first thing we're checking is like, okay, what are you building or what are you trying to show? Can I read this? Can my inspectors, when they go out on site, make heads or tails of these drawings? So that's the first chunk. And then we'll dive into, is the building going to fall down? So
that's a good one to ask, I guess.
There's maybe a good example.
Do you have a checklist?
We have checklists for different permit types. And,
Is the building going to fall down? Is that one of the questions?
no, it should be. I guess the first question. I don't know. So maybe a good example of this, just to illustrate, is like a load-bearing wall. So somebody wants to take out a load-bearing wall in their house, and most people are intuitively going to know you need to put a beam in to support whatever's above that, maybe a couple of posts, and then that's usually where most people stop. And they forget to think, okay, what's supporting those posts below the floor? And so we're going to look at that and say, how do you actually transfer that load down to the foundation? Things like that.
So another thing I want to know too is, so that's just like high level, but there's a lot of permit applications that are probably just, renovations to a house, additions, decks, whatever, those sorts of things. And I kind of put them in one category, right? Like you're just like, hey, I want a new sunroom. Let's apply for a permit. It's pretty basic, whatever. But is there another layer to a permit application that has like a second suite or an additional dwelling unit? Because I've seen that kind of change over the years. When this first kind of came out, it was a little bit easier. Now it seems to get more complex when we're submitting for a permit for a triplex conversion or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. So two things. The first is the building code is somewhere around, I think the Ontario building code is 2,400 pages or 2,200 pages. Not every provision in the building code is applicable to every project. So when you're looking at a duplex or a triplex versus a single family dwelling, we typically don't have to look at fire separations. We don't have to look at egress as closely because it's only one occupant. So when you have a duplex or a triplex, you're just adding on more requirements. So there's more things the plans examiner has to check. Second to that is the building code currently, the current Ontario building code defines a house as up to 2 units, and it has a bunch of special provisions or exemptions really for houses. So for example, the ceiling height in a basement is permitted to be lower in a house than it is in an apartment building. Where this gets tricky is when the province allowed 3 units as of right. So now everybody's like, okay, I want 3 units in my house. The building code says a 3-unit building is an apartment building, not a house. And so all of those special provisions for a house, throw them out the window. So now you get
the egress window.
Sorry,
is it an egress window? You have to throw them out.
Hopefully,
okay.
Yeah. So all of those provisions that
you just want to be so compliant.
You want to do the right thing.
Oh, yeah. So all of those kind of exemptions that you would have previously gotten for a house, there's not a ton of them, but like ceiling height's a big one, right? Ceiling height's hard to correct. If you don't have enough height in your basement, like you're underpinning it or you're lifting the house somehow, like both of those are pretty costly. So not having that exemption for a triplex can be really challenging.
What do you have, like, are there different guys at the city or a municipality, whatever, for like, I don't know, is there someone who would do like apartment buildings versus single family units, or is that kind of like a seniority thing?
It's going to vary building department to building department. So some of the, let's say the smaller building departments, you might have one chief building official that does everything. So he's the, he takes in the permits, he does all the administrative work, he does the on-site inspections, plans review. Then you go somewhere like Toronto and they have, hundreds if not thousands of building employees. So depending on what city you're dealing with, they're going to have a different structure. Often you'll have, some level of specialization. So for example, where I work, we have a plans examination team, and then we have an on-site inspection team. So I'm looking at the plans, someone else is on site. And then within plans examination, we'll look at large buildings, some will look at small buildings kind of thing.
Yeah, okay.
But it's going to vary. So
question, if I'm submitting, if I want to get stuff done, what is the, I don't know, do you have any tips for me? Like, you've alluded to a couple things already, like make sure you send in all the drawings, make sure they kind of match up,
Don't draw them on a napkin.
No, like, I don't know. Are there like top 3 things that you shouldn't do? I mean, if I slide you a box of donuts or something, will that help?
For a coffee, but yeah. I would say if you're not familiar with architectural drawing practices, just hire a designer.
Right.
It's going to save you so much headache. If you try to do it all yourself and you don't know what you're doing, like Yeah, it's no wonder people have bad experiences with building departments when they try to do that, because the building department's going to expect a certain level of submission.
But as a homeowner, you're allowed to submit your own.
So the building code. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. You need, let's say an architect, an engineer, or a registered designer, BCIN designer. There are exemptions for certain things. So for example, a homeowner could theoretically design their own addition.
Right.
They might not have the skills to do it, but they're permitted to do it by the building code.
Yeah.
So just because you're permitted to do it doesn't mean it's necessarily a good idea. So that would be kind of the first tip. The second is to really think through what you're going to do and have your drawings reflect that, rather than just, slapping something on a page, sending it to the building department, and then, okay, we'll figure it out on site. What's going to happen then is the inspector shows up and he's like, oh, this doesn't match the drawings.
Right.
Resubmit. And now you just delayed the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So as much as you can, plan ahead and submit what you're actually planning on building.
Okay. And when do I need to apply? I know this will vary per municipality, but in general, when do I need to apply for a building permit? So,
like what type of project you mean?
yeah, like if I'm building a deck,
Whatever you're doing at your house, you probably do need to.
Listen, let's leave my house out of this, okay?
For all the Hamilton inspectors listening, his address is. You'll notice it by the big thing in the backyard.
No, I mean, if it's attached to my house, or if it's a certain size, is that a good rule of thumb?
Yeah, every municipality is going to draw the line somewhere different. So as a general rule, anything that's attached to your house, you have to get a building permit. Any sort of material change. So when I say material, I don't mean like,
Flooring.
Brick to wood.
I mean something like substantial. Any substantial change. You're moving walls around, even if they're not load bearing. You probably need to get a building permit because you're affecting room areas. You're affecting passive egress. Things like that. If you're not sure, just ask. Your building department will tell you. Decks. Most decks are going to need a building permit.
Okay. So you said just ask. Do you record if people are asking? So if I was like, if I wanted to build, another building in my backyard, would anybody follow up on that in a month? No. Okay. All right. So just ask. That's safe.
Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, building departments are not out to get you.
Okay.
So, all jokes aside about the rejection, I would say building officials, share a lot of similarities in some ways to police officers, right? You get one bad police officer and they're going to get a bad reputation, and that's kind of what people are going to think about.
Yeah.
In the same way, you get, one overzealous building official, and that kind of, sets a tone. Everyone's like, oh.
But in general, they're trying to pass your project through
Right.
the system so that you can comply and build it.
We don't want to hold up your permit. If you don't meet the building code and we tell you this is what you have to do to meet the building code and you don't do it.
But there just seems to be so much red tape. It's I don't know where they're do you have a red tape dispenser there? It's
right next to our rejection scoreboard.
Yeah. So where are we at now with the number of units that you can build? Because you mentioned as of right. I don't know if everybody fully understands. We've kind of talked about that, but what does the province say? What is municipality saying in terms of how many units you can add? Because on this podcast, we're talking about investing and trying to deploy money into real estate. Mm-hmm. Most of the time that means adding units, right?
Right. So to understand that, maybe we'll back up a little bit and just give a brief framework of what zoning is. So a zoning zoning bylaw is essentially a set of, a list of rules of what you can and cannot do on a particular property. So the municipality, based on, their objectives and their framework, have said, this area we're going to designate to industrial buildings. This area is residential, and they'll kind of come up with a framework of how they lay out the town so that they can plan for roads, sewers, water, etc. Through that, they will say, okay, this particular lot, you can have X number of dwelling units. Maybe this one, you can only have one. Back a couple of years, I think it was Bill 23, the province sort of changed that a little bit, and they said a municipality cannot restrict you from having up to 3 units on an urban residential parcel of land. So we'll unpack that in a second, but basically what that did was unlock a lot of existing homeowners now, qualified as an urban parcel of residential land, they can build up to 3 units on their property. So that could be 3 units in the, shall we say, house or apartment building, as the building code might call it. Or you might have, this is pretty common. You'll have a upper unit, maybe a basement apartment, and then a garden suite or a laneway suite, something like that.
So 3 is the maximum that the province enforced and passed down.
Right.
But now, like, I'm aware of some municipalities, like Toronto, you could do 5.
Yeah.
Hamilton's allowing 4. So why is there variation? Just is every municipality has the freedom to do whatever they want, but the province is mandating no less than 3.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So it makes perfect sense for a city to try to have as much density as they can. So someone like Toronto or Hamilton is probably going to permit more than that. But what that really did was those smaller municipalities, now they cannot restrict you from having up to 3 units. And in order to meet that exemption, like you have to have an urban parcel of land. So what that means is you're just connected to city water and sewer.
And is there, I know one thing that people have talked about and is the capacity of your sewer lines and capacity of your neighborhoods to accept all these people. And I remember seeing someone did a sort of a comparison of, it was in Toronto, but like the 1950s population density versus now, and it has dropped significantly, probably due to the fact that just families are smaller. So now, people are saying, oh, we don't have the capacity, but it's like, actually, we're just building that density back up to where it was in the 50s. So even if you got old sewer line, I think you guys are fine.
Yeah.
But I mean, is that a concern?
It's not Ian's concern.
Not my concern.
Not my problem.
It's maybe a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. So I'm not super familiar. And again, that's going to vary municipality by municipality too, and even just area. So there's a difference. Upper Hamilton, where they have dedicated water or sanitary and storm sewers, versus Lower Hamilton, where from what I understand, they're mostly combined. So that's going to vary, city to city. It's going to vary neighborhood to neighborhood. It might even vary street to street.
Yeah.
So whether we're approaching critical levels in our infrastructure, maybe I don't know. I'm not big.
What do you think is the opportunity here for people, whether it's homeowners, investors? Like, from your perspective, you're seeing applications come in. You're looking at the building code as it's changing too, right? Different iterations. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much you get into the cost of different things, but you're seeing some trends. What do you think is the opportunity for people out there in real estate?
So approximately 30 or 40% of our permit applications currently are basement apartments. So I think that's a big opportunity that a lot of people have recognized is, you've got this basement, maybe you're not doing anything with it, or it's just storage. You can clear out some stuff, put a separate entrance into it, and now you can rent it out for, I don't know what's a going rate for basement apartment these days, but so generate that extra cash flow. So obviously that's a big opportunity. And then if you have the space in the backyard to do a detached ADU, I think that's a great opportunity too. If it's just wasted space that you're not really doing anything with, put another unit there. We're the messaging that we keep getting pushed from the province and even nationally is we're short on housing. So we got all these people coming to the GTA. We got to put them somewhere.
So, yeah. So there's
them in your basement.
What's that?
Put them in your basement.
Or your backyard.
Yeah.
In the tree fort. No. So there have been some announcements lately, which we should probably go over. Okay, you got it. You got it up on the screen there. First one was one that we mentioned a couple of weeks back, and that was the increase of CMHC eligible homes from 1 million to 1.5 million. And we talked about that quickly. We didn't have, I think, all the information there, but that's basically limited to primary homeowners. So it's got to be a home that you are going to be living in. And
or a close relative.
Clear at the time. What's that?
Or a close relative. So when I skimmed through the
I think that's a new
data on that, they did also say if you have a close relative that occupies one of the units that you could qualify to.
Well, so that's the second announcement. The the secondary suite one, but this one was just for kind of aimed at first-time home buyers, and we were kind of laughing like, oh yeah, $1.5 million. That's what a first, but it's interesting, right? That's what the government is essentially saying, is that a home, you could have your first home up to $1.5 million, and we're cool with that. In fact, we'll help you, which is is just mind-blowing. But anyways, it's got to be a primary home. So it's not for investment properties, anything like that. But the thing that they've announced now is that they will allow CMHC insurance up to $2 million for homeowners to add secondary suites. And there's been a lot of...
Up to 4 units.
Up to 4 units. Been a lot of debate about this. So I guess my first question is, okay, are you seeing homeowners building 3-4 suites in their prime? My guess is that no, nobody would ever do this.
Well,
basement apartments, yes.
Just to clarify for listeners, the announcements you're talking about are improvements to the financing options, right? So right now, if somebody wants to build a second suite or build something, they're limited to whatever equity they can access out of their home, their existing HELOC or whatever. And then, while the city wants to have increased density, I just can't afford to build it, right? Sorry. So these announcements, why they're so important or interesting to us, especially as investors, because now all of a sudden there's this big pot of money that's accessible, and people can go out and add these dwelling units at a much more favorable rate.
So, there's mixed thoughts about this, right? Some people are like, okay, so the answer to high housing prices is more debt. Is that really a smart thing for homeowners? And so on one hand, I kind of get that. On the other hand, if it's cheaper debt and you can use that to your advantage. So anyways, back to the original question. Are you seeing any homeowners doing triplexes where they live, or is that mostly basement apartments? I get homeowners will do that for sure. Mm-hmm. But 3-4 units, have you seen anybody doing that on a property they live in?
Yeah, not a ton so far, and it's hard to know if they're planning on living there or not, because it really doesn't make any difference from a building code perspective.
Right. Okay.
But I think, and this kind of touches on what we were talking about a little bit earlier about the sewer overloads, is you walk around any neighborhood right now and you're not going to see, this crazy influx of density. It's a pretty gentle densification. So you might have, the odd house here and there putting in a garden suite and something like that, or converting a garage to a unit, but it's not going to be, you're not going to have a crazy development all at once.
Yeah.
And in the same way, a triplex or 3-4 units in your house, it's going to take time.
Yeah. And I mean, so my thesis is that okay, a basement suite, homeowners can be comfortable adding that. Are homeowners going to be adding 4 units into their, or adding 3 units for a total of 4? Into their, that's a whole
I think if
level,
anything,
right?
the homeowner will do it and then move out.
Well,
they'll live there for
question,
2 months,
right?
And go, I'm going to rent this out and move.
Or
right?
my son is going to live here, and who's going to police that, right?
Yeah.
Yep, no, we're going to move in, or my son's going to move in, and then you build it, and mysteriously, oh no, life circumstances change, so we can't anymore, so we're just going to rent it out.
Turns out our family of 6 can't live in a 1-bedroom.
So how are they going to police that? And that is not clear.
Do you think they necessarily want to police that, or they're trying to create a framework to issue these loans, and then whatever happens, and what's the worst case is somebody builds a 4-plex, now there's 4 times as many dwelling units, and now the guy moves out. Do they really care about that? I think they are looking for more density, not necessarily density that the homeowner lives in.
That's the question. Is it a bit of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge?
I think it is.
This is just for homeowners.
It's like a wink, 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 nudge, nudge. Yeah.
Well, you might have differing answers from different perspective, right? So the bank might care more than the people who are trying to build more houses and get more units. They probably don't care who's living there, whether it's you or your family member, or you're not living there at all. The bank might.
Well, the bank is in the business of loaning money. So at the end of the day, they have their guidelines, but once the loan conditions are satisfied, you know, are they, once the renewal time comes up, are they going to ask, like, what? I don't recall ever being asked about.
When are we starting our bank again?
Well, let me see what I got here.
Oh man!
Oh, I got some money in my pocket.
Wow.
So.
Okay. There you go.
Well, actually, to start a bank, you don't need money. You need it's the license to print money, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. But no, it's. I've been like thinking about this over the last while. Like, how is this going to be used? And because homeowners only. And I don't know if you've read through it, Brent, but I thought the idea was this has to be a property you already have, and I think live in. Was that the?
Yeah, I don't really read through government announcements, so I just kind of go, yeah.
I bet you Ian does.
Yeah.
He seems like the kind of guy who would enjoy that.
Good nighttime reading. Puts me to sleep.
No, I've read through, but and they also, you can't use any as a short-term rental, which is like
Yeah, they just saw your business and just wanted to kill it.
Yeah. Anti-mark legislation.
Well, one other thing that you do, Ian, is you're on a building code committee.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you allowed to talk about this?
Sure. So it's basically a code interpretation committee. So it's made up of building officials all over Ontario. One of the goals of that committee is to, we're all using the same building code. Like the Ontario building code is the same in Ottawa as it is in Toronto, but there are certain parts of it that might be vague or open to interpretation. So what the goal of the committee is to try to align the province so that, if you're a contractor, you're not getting two different answers, one municipality to the next. So that's really kind of the key focus of that community is just, let's hash things out. And you're never going to get everybody on the same page, but I think just talking about it.
So there's like different representatives from each or different areas.
Correct.
And then all they do is fight about whose interpretation is right or...
Yeah, it's less of
I kind of want to know how this works in the back.
Yeah, it's not a fight
right?
at all. It's a really actually well-run committee.
Okay.
It's super helpful. There's certain, the building code is, what did I say, 2,200 pages, something like that. Even I don't read every single one of them.
What?
Yeah.
Secrets out. So you might miss something, or you get a different perspective for someone. It's like, oh, I never thought about it that way. That actually makes a lot of sense. You can dive into the intent of the building code. So maybe a good example to illustrate this is the building code has requirements for glass area. So if you have a living room, for example, you have a living room in your basement, you need to have a certain amount of glass area based on the area of that living room.
You mean window, right?
A window, yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of people think that is for providing natural light. It is not. If you dig into the intent and the objectives that are in the building code, the objective is to provide views to the outdoors. So if you have a frosted window, you could argue that does not provide a view to the outdoors and shouldn't count.
What does the building code care about views to the outdoors?
So it's all about occupant health and safety. So that's fundamentally that's what the building code is all about. Is protecting the health of occupants. So that could be things like the building not falling down, which most people understand. That could be making sure you can get out in the path of if there's a fire.
Restricting anyone from bringing Diet Coke into the house. It doesn't have a clause for that. Okay.
And so even just like things that you might not think about, like if you have plumbing fixtures, like you need to make sure that they drain and don't back up, because obviously that's a health concern if they don't drain properly. And then similarly, views to the outdoors, it's kind of like if you're in a dark dungeon all day, like that is going to take a toll on you. I think that we probably understand that. Mm-hmm. And so the building code recognizes that and says, okay, if this is a room that you're living in or spending a good chunk of your day in, they want you to be able to see outside. It's just.
And does it matter if there's like a brick wall out there? Does it matter what's on the outside?
Yeah. So now you're entering the room for interpretation.
Okay. Listen, I just in my head I have like this idea of what you guys do, and it's like there's interpretive dance. It's like, okay, guys, section Section 439C1. This is very vague, and I've prepared an interpretive dance, which is my vision of how this should play out.
You're going to have to watch this video.
If I'd prepared better, I would have had an interpretive dance for the view of the outside or whatever it was. But anyways, let's get back on track. So it actually matters what you can see. So you can't just be
Building
like...
code doesn't specify. The building code says it wants to provide views to the outdoors.
Right.
What that view is, okay, now we're talking interpretation. The building code is a set of minimum standards. So there's always better ways of doing things. From my perspective, if you have a view to the outside, regardless of what that view is, you've met the building code requirement. The building code doesn't say what you have to look at. But if you have a skylight and all you can see is the sky, well, that's outdoors. You can see outdoors. If your example, you're looking at a brick wall, it's not necessarily a nice view, but it is outdoors.
Yeah.
So that's where, good design comes in, less so than, a building code requirement.
But would you be within your right to say, like, no, you've got a view to the brick wall that's like right next door. I'm not going to approve that. Would you be within your right to do that?
To interpret it that way.
How close are we talking? Like
I don't know, like no. Let's say there's a walkway, so 36 inches, so like 3 feet.
Yeah, I think the building code doesn't care what you're looking at.
No, but I'm saying, could you, as a plans examiner, reject that?
I think
He's got a list of things he's trying to apply for.
Yeah, I think you'd have a hard argument to do that.
Okay.
And there's, if you disagree with a call that your building department's made, there are avenues to challenge that. So, if you think that the building department has overstepped their boundaries, the Building Code Act has, a pathway for you. It's very easy. You go to the Building Code Commission.
Is it a pathway or an avenue? Sorry.
Yeah, maybe it's a road. I don't know. So you go to the Building Code Commission, and they'll look at the building code and determine whether or not you complied. So my opinion on that is it doesn't matter what you're looking at. You just have to have views to the outdoors. Okay. And that could be a whole range of things, but that's just one example.
Okay, so there is room for interpretation. No, but there's a little bit of room. I mean, obviously, if it's something related to like your mechanical or whatever, like, no, it has to be this way and that's it. But other stuff you could argue. Okay, good to know.
Well, another thing I want to know is, does the building code change and when? And like, do you get to see the changes before I do? Or like, are there things coming down the pipe that we need to know about? Or
coming to cinemas near you, changes to the building code.
Yeah, so the new building code is coming out on January 1.
Oh, okay.
The 2024 building code will be released on January 1, 2025.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So I don't know why they didn't call it the 2025 building code, but maybe the naming convention.
That's open to interpretation, I guess.
So that you can access it now. It's free to download on the ministry's website. It will likely be amended before January 1. So there's already changes coming. The building code does update pretty frequently, like a few times a year. And most of that's just minor, like maybe clerical errors or something like that, especially with a new code. There's going to be lots of those types of changes or edits.
Do you think there's a lot of changes on these legal second suites, third suites, those sorts of things? Like, I would assume like 10 years ago, nobody was really doing a legal interior conversion or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And then they had codes that would kind of govern that. But then now that they've had hundreds of these things come through, they're probably like, oh, we should change this.
Yeah, in general, the building codes are going to lag behind the industry.
Yeah.
So the industry is always innovating. People are coming up with new materials, new ways of building things, new ideas. Building codes catch up later. So that's just it's always been that way. It's always going to be that way. Government moves slower, and it takes time to write the codes and see what's the best practice here, especially if you've never seen it before. In terms of secondary suites, I mean, they're not that new. They might be new in some of these smaller communities, but any downtown, like major cities, had multiple units in a dwelling for decades.
Yeah.
So it's not really a new concept to have a basement apartment per se.
Interesting. Is there anything like new and exciting in the 2024 building code?
Yeah, they say it's the biggest change to the building code since the first Ontario building code.
Wow.
So they say,
so we should apply now.
Changes.
Apply now if you're going to do a project, or wait.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't dug into all of the changes. Most of what I've seen has been pretty inconsequential. The big thing that they're trying to do is align with the national code. So Canada has a model code. In the past, Ontario has sort of picked and choosed what they wanted from that, and then written what they didn't like and changed it. The federal government has really been pushing all the provinces to align. So we're all across Canada using the same building codes. If you're a contractor that lives on the border of two provinces and you work in both, that you're fundamentally, it's the same. It's not, dramatically different. So a lot of these changes that are coming from the national level, that's, a big part of these so-called 2,400 changes. I'm not sure exactly how many it is. But so far I haven't seen any that are like, oh, this is a big game changer.
Yeah, okay.
A lot of, renumbering things and tweaking things a little bit here and there, but nothing that's, crazy different. Fire separations for secondary suites, the rules have been relaxed a little bit. Ceiling heights, the rules have been relaxed a little bit. So there are some changes that will affect, kind of what we're doing here with basement apartments and that sort of thing. But nothing that I'd write home about. Okay.
All right. Let's talk about development charges a little bit, because that seems to irk a lot of people. Okay, who sets the development chart? Like, I know the city does, but like, who in the cities consults and figures out what to charge for?
Director of development charges.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that position existed, Brent.
They got a really nice car.
Probably. No, I mean, do plans examiners have any input on that or any vision? No. Okay, it's not you. I can't yell at you.
Do you even see what the development charges are, like when you issue a permit? No,
none, not a clue.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have no clue.
Huh, interesting. Okay, because I mean, we've seen some examples of development charges that are like just mind-boggling, right? And what was it? Vaughan was the one example they had, something like 190,000 per single-family unit. It's
right.
like,
I think Hamilton's like almost $100,000 per unit.
We're getting mixed messages, right? Like, we're almost in this time where, like, one branch of the government says they want increased housing, and by the way, we're going to create some financing opportunity that's available up to $2 million for people. And then the other, like the municipality, trickles down and it's like, but you can build this, but it's going to cost all these fees. So it's like, it's permitted, but it's cost prohibitive. And you're going to get mixed messages. Like, do I take action and do this because that's what one organization is trying to incentivize? Or do I just hold off and wait until they relax it? Like, is the housing going to actually get built?
Yeah.
I think we're just living in a very confusing time.
yeah.
See, Mark just looks totally bewildered.
I'm in that confusing time now, Brent.
They have relaxed the DCs, particularly when it comes to 2 and 3 units. So, like, for example, in Hamilton, if you build those 3 units, the as of right units, there's no DCs. There's like maybe $1,000 for education or something, but virtually wipe them out. Instead of $100,000 on DCs, you're paying $1,000.
Yeah. So, but it's the 4th unit where they
right
in Hamilton, anyways, where they really. I mean, I think you came across that, right?
Yeah. We were both doing. We were looking at the one project. I think I mentioned that last podcast too. Yeah, it was like $95,000 fee to add the 4th unit, right? So the first 3, it's like, yeah, go ahead, whatever you want to put that 4th unit on. It's like not a chance. So
and that could change over time as let's say a municipality really wants to encourage development. They have ways to do that. They can lower their DCs or they can lower their building permit fees.
But we were talking about this before, how there's almost this, like, they're in a conundrum, right? Like, they want to incentivize the building, but they know that if they make it cost prohibitive, they're going to have illegal dwellings popping up everywhere, right? But then if they make it cheaper, then they're not making their money. I don't know how they look at this, but it's almost like a moral question.
Yeah, could be. I mean, and then you look at what DCs are for too. It's to provide that infrastructure. So, the water, the sewers, that kind of thing. Like, that's what those DCs are being used for. So
Allegedly.
right, allegedly, yeah.
Mark's very skeptical.
$190,000 worth of sewer. I don't think so.
We need a Mark rant.
Well, okay, Toronto. We mentioned it last time, right? It's the increase in development charges is like 1,000% in the last 10-ish years. Like you can't tell me the cost of cement to make a bigger sewer, increase by like they're using it for either stupid things or for their capital. I think it goes into like a capital projects thing, which apparently in Toronto they have a massive amount of money in that fund, their capital projects fund. It's like, why don't you guys spend it and so you don't flood every time there's a little rainstorm, right?
Yeah.
Like put the development charges to work. But anyways, that's a little bit of a side rant. Like, yeah, I know what it's supposed to be for, and that it makes sense, right? If you're going to add to the or you need more capacity for infrastructure, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Let's pay something for that. But I mean, even that's debatable. Like, should the city just provide that because it's going to increase their tax base and so forth? But that's a debate for another time.
Why don't we drop this on listeners too about the St. Catharines ADU grants? So
yeah,
this is something you were looking into recently, but yeah, St. Catharines has an ADU grant program, right?
Right.
Brand new.
Brand new?
I don't think it's brand new.
I thought they just changed it.
They increased the values. So I think
That's
the program
brand new.
existed before, but now it's a much bigger chunk of money. So you can get up to a $40,000 grant for basement apartment type, internal dwelling unit, and up to $80,000 on a detached ADU.
So when you say grant, what do you mean by grant? Just to be very clear, free money, like
no strings
here's
attached.
$40,000.
Government will print it and give it to you.
Wow. So how does it, I don't know, do you have any details? Like, is it limited to X amount of people, or do they have like a pot of money and once it runs dry,
once Mark applies, it's gone.
Yeah. My understanding.
Uh,
is it for homeowners?
I don't know if they have I don't think it has to be a homeowner per se. It's just my sense of it is St. Catharines is trying to increase the number of rental units.
Yeah.
Or just units in general. So they're incentivizing people to build essentially. So they have a pot of money, and you can apply to get a piece of that, put it towards your development. Once the money runs out, then the program's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. I know I posted this, I think maybe in the Rockstar chat a while back, and I read through it, and I've kind of forgotten all the details now. There were some caveats, but
well, you have to apply. You can't apply for the grant until you have a permit.
Right.
So you got to get a permit, and it's up to 70% of the relevant costs, right? So if you have a contract with a contractor who's doing some landscaping, like those things wouldn't apply. It's just the cost to do the construction, and 70% of those costs up to $40,000 or up to $80,000. But like that's a pretty big deal for somebody who's like a basement apartment. I mean, if you're going to do the construction yourself. Like this is an incentive almost to do it legally, right? Because you have to get the permit to get this grant.
Yeah.
So yeah, do your design, get a permit, then apply for the grant, and then you can take your time kind of getting the construction built out. But $40,000 goes a fair amount when you're doing a basement apartment, right?
Right. If you had a $60,000 construction cost, they covered 70% of that, so approximately $40,000. You're out of pocket $20,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, which ain't bad, because all of a sudden now you can, that changes your financing profile, right? Maybe it's, maybe it was your line of credit, or maybe you just had that money, money sitting around, you're going to finance the rest.
You do still have to fund it. So the grant they'll give you the grant money when construction is done. So you have to fund it up until that point.
Right.
So what they want is you get, in an ideal world, you get your building permit before you start construction. You apply for this grant, they will approve you or whatever, and then you can start construction, and when it's done, they'll give you the grant money.
So now all of our listeners are going to move to St. Catharines or at least buy property there.
And we don't know how much they have left in that pool. So it could be that they have, they've just started it and they have tons of money left, and it could be that they're down to the last few projects. So definitely, if somebody's thinking about doing a ADU in St. Catharines, now's a great time to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Because what was it, up to 80 grand for a ADU?
Like a
80?
detached,
Yeah.
And I mean, detached is a lot more expensive than a basement apartment to actually build, right? But it's like 80,000 again. That's
big chunk of it.
That's a big chunk, right?
Yeah.
So, I think we can expect to see some more units popping up in the near future about that. So, what does Ian think about real estate investing? Like, okay, so you're living your life doing designs, you're doing plans examining, and then you came across our company and it seemed to be a good fit. But like, why is that? How did that come to be?
So I'm pretty bullish on real estate in the GTA as a whole, or real estate in general, for a couple of reasons. One, land, they're not making more of it. Two, we seem to have more and more people coming to the Toronto area, Southern Ontario every year. So Canada's seen across the world as a really like a good place to be. People want to be here. People from all over the world, like that. This is where they want to be. So I'm pretty confident, I guess, in real estate as a whole. I can tell you the story about how I stumbled on Good Stewards.
Let's hear it.
It is a kind of a...
Let's hear it.
Still boggles my mind sometimes. So I was on Facebook Marketplace looking for stuff I don't need, as is my custom.
Of course.
And I stumbled across this rental unit in Hamilton. And I'm not looking for a rental unit in Hamilton, but I saw it. And okay. So I open it up and I'm like, this is the nicest detached ADU I've ever seen. And I look at the seller, the posters, details, and it's like, oh, Brent Vanderwood. And I was like, that's a Dutch sounding guy. I bet you I know some people he knows. So I ended up Googling Brent or Good Stewards or something, found the website. And on the website, I saw some testimonials from people I know. I saw Rebecca, who I know. And so I was like, oh, that's strange, like small world. Just like didn't even know about this. So through that, I started listening to the podcast and heard you guys were doing the detached ADU tour. Signed up for the tour. So my wife and I went to that, chatted with Brent for a while afterwards, and I guess the rest is history.
So, okay, just to be clear, you weren't looking to rent a place, or you weren't looking to buy an ADU. You just thought, hey, I should take my wife on it. Like, how do you sell that to your wife? Let's go on a tour of ADUs.
Yeah, because I really liked it. Like, there's a lot of, I mean, this comes, touches on design, but like, it was just really well thought out. And I could see that from the listing photos. So just the way it was positioned on the site, the way that it interacted with the existing house, there's just a lot of parts about it that I thought were really well laid out. And I was like, that's something, I'd like to do. So I want to see this.
Yeah. Who knew, Brent? Small world, eh?
Yeah, it blows my mind. But yeah, I'm glad we connected, because I don't like the building code, and you do, so I think it works good. But another thing you've mentioned to me too is like doing things the right way, and we've kind of seen both sides of it in our company over the last like 5 years, just like applying for something and deciding whether or not to put everything in the drawings, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what's your philosophy on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a municipal building official,
so he
this
can't
is gonna influence this answer me a little bit. But
sit down, everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, if you already know what you're gonna do, just be honest about it. Put it on the drawings, like the inspectors.
But why?
Because the inspectors are gonna check. They're gonna be there on site.
But like, what if you can get it past the inspector?
I'm all about getting one past the inspector.
But what's the objective?
Yeah, no. So this is where you need to tell us.
Right. So, I mean, if you think about the building code being a minimum set of standards, right? I'm always going to design something well above and beyond the building code. So I should have no problem hitting that minimum standard. And I'm also not there on site every day watching the contractors. And so that's just one more set of eyes that's kind of making sure things are installed the correct way.
That's the philosophy, Brent.
Okay. So yeah, that means you have to get a permit Like,
chances are, with Ian around, you're going to be.
we should do a poll of listeners. Like, how many people get permits for stuff? I don't know. I'm curious.
We should do one in the office here, and I suspect it would be around 50%. Okay, Brent, I have to ask you. We got to wrap up soon.
Yeah,
but I got to ask you about this property assessment service that you all are offering. I saw it the other day. I had a preview, looked through it, looked very flashy. I don't want to get my property assessed, so I didn't dig in that deeply. What's that?
You're very skeptical.
Always skeptical, yeah. It's probably some kind of conspiracy is what I think. But why don't you tell me a little bit about the...
Can we build a bunker? Do you have enough tinfoil hats?
Do you have a building permit for your bunker?
Yeah. Do you have canned goods in the corner? Yeah. No, so a big part of what we've been doing over the last number of years is helping people guiding people through the decision-making process of adding dwelling units, whether it's for an investment property that like they don't live in, or it's their own house. So you keep getting questions, and I guess the overriding theme is like, what is the potential with what I have, right? And that speaks to like what we're talking about on the show too, like stewardship, right? We realize that everything that we have is a gift, and you almost have to take a step back sometimes and assess what you have, right? Whether it's like we talked about household, your relationships, your family, whatever, your time, right? There's periods where you have to take a step back and say, okay, what is in front of me that I have to work with, and then make a plan, and then, you know, over time you can execute that plan. So we've kind of just really codified this all into a service now that we can offer to people, more or less a package, right? Because before it's just kind of like, you know, a question here, a question there, and nobody ever really got the full picture unless they kind of engaged with us and went through the design process. Yeah. And so now what we're trying to do is kind of put all the answers to people's questions in one package, right? So we have the opportunity to go to site to actually see like, okay, what is the property you're working with? What is your situation? And then after that, we actually go through the criteria and the development parameters, some of the financials that you could expect if you were to develop your property.
So this is just, to be clear, this is just for the property and not all the other things you talked about, like my family, my relationships.
Yeah, no. Well, maybe a future service.
Help design that.
We'll get Mark on board. We'll do time management,
a therapist, and a counselor,
children's discipline
there we go.
Assessment service. How much is that one going to cost?
So is this an online thing, or is this an in-person kind of thing?
In person. Yeah. So basically 3 steps. And if people want to check it out, you can go to goodstewards.ca/discover. And we'll kind of link to that in the show notes. But basically the first step is we actually come out to site, check out your stuff. The second step is we generate a report. So, you know, we're doing our own work in the background. Ian's going to be heavily involved in that, you know, collecting the data from, you know, whatever municipality, ensuring that the information that we're giving is legit. It will answer your questions. The idea is kind of like, it's a once for all, like, this is the report you need to say, this is what I'm sitting on and this is what I can do. Right. Yeah. And of course it's time bound, like things might change, zoning might change or whatever, but, the best we can do with what we have now. And then the third step is, we have basically a strategy session, and, we invite people down to the office. We go over every aspect of the report and kind of make your pathway forward, like whether or not you actually want to take action right away, or it's something that you think, oh, maybe in a year or two, like, you know, I'm going to pick away at this project, but then you kind of have an end goal in mind, right? And you're working towards enhancing your property value and its income potential, rather than kind of just floundering around and doing a few projects here and there on your house or investment property. This is kind of like putting, you know, a target, a 5-year target, so to speak, and working towards that.
So this is for like, if my existing home.
Yeah.
I guess, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll also do something similar. Like if somebody's looking to buy a house, will you do is that the same program, or is that a different kind of thing? Like, I want to buy a house, Brent. I don't know, maybe I should have an ADU.
Yeah. There's a little bit of overlap there. Like the the goal with this assessment is your current house.
Okay.
Or investment property, right? So something you already own that you want to assess what is the potential of it. We've done a couple already, according to the new packaged assessment service. But one was an investment property. A couple other ones were homes where people live. It doesn't apply to everybody too. It's not supposed to be like fix everyone's problems, but some people, like, their development potential is just really limited. It might not make sense with their finances. Is it just not the right time? But the idea there is, like the other services you mentioned, going into sourcing a property for someone, right? So that is a service that we offer. That's kind of our core service. We basically take that assessment and apply it to different properties on your behalf to find one that meets criteria that you're looking for.
Okay, yeah. So this is something you've been doing, but now you're just going to apply it to an existing property rather than like the new. Okay. I mean, I do something similar. I have done. Where I'll come out and look at the property, but the answer is always Airbnb. Yeah, it's always like, yep, you got to add an Airbnb.
So now you know who to call.
How you do it.
If you want an Airbnb, you call Mark.
I don't have a designer. I don't have plans. I don't have nothing. It's just like, yep, you should add an Airbnb. So take your pick. No, that's cool though. It's cool to see like the growth, and now that Ian's around, you have more capacity to offer this stuff.
Yeah, it's a big step in the right direction, and I think for listeners, for people who might have potential with developing their property, our idea is to price this service low. Like we did 5 for free. I'm sure there's going to be more discounts coming out, but the idea is like, just do this one thing, get all your answers figured out, and then you can take it from there, right?
Because it could be, do I stay here? Do I move?
Yeah.
Could give you that clarity, right? I've talked to people about the same thing. It's like, I don't know, what do you want to do?
Airbnb.
So, whatever you do, you should Airbnb it. So
I think there's probably a lot of people that might have had an idea like, oh, maybe I'll put in a basement apartment, or maybe I'll put something in the backyard, but that's kind of where that thought ends.
Yeah.
And so by having sort of a assessment package tailored to that specific property, it's like, this is actually doable. This is, where it could be. This is how big it could be, or your city allows it, but it can only be this size. Like, just gives you some like actual concrete parameters to work with, and now you can start thinking, okay, maybe that is possible. Maybe we can go that way.
Yeah, or maybe things that people just haven't thought about. Yeah. Like I find a lot of people still don't know what an ADU is, or that it's allowed.
Have we defined an ADU?
I don't want to get into that too much because the definition keeps changing.
For those who haven't heard, ADU is just accessory dwelling unit. So that could be an extra unit somewhere on your property.
Yeah.
In the house, out of the house, doesn't matter.
But it's finding out what they can do. It's also answering the question, like, what if you can't do anything? Well, now you know for sure, like, hey, under the current zoning, under the current criteria, with your current financing, like, this is your option. You're limited, right? And people want to know that too, right? Like, and kind of cross things off. Like, all right, that's a good thing to know. And I think in terms of stewardship, working with the resources you have, like, now you kind of know, let's look at another opportunity, right? And that's something that we're cognizant of too, right? Like if something doesn't work on your property, it could work elsewhere. So if you have an appetite for development, but you're limited on your property, like there's an opportunity somewhere else in that neighborhood probably to do a development project that would make sense, right? So,
and it's not just urban areas. Like some municipalities, even in the rural areas, will let you build ADUs. So if you've got a country property, not all areas you can do this, but some of them you can build. I think Pelham allows you to do up to 1,000 square feet detached ADU. So
wow.
That's a pretty, substantial unit, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of potential there too.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
You gonna get one, Mark?
I have to do the assessment first.
There you go.
I don't have any room left on my property.
We'll give you a 2 stewards discount. Oh, we should do that actually.
Yeah? You want to do a case study?
Maybe I'll do a 2 stewards discount for the assessment for listeners. Only for listeners.
I don't feel comfortable having like an official plans examiner come to come to my property and be like, what? We did what?
Where do you live?
I can think of like, what's that?
Where do you live?
I'm not telling you.
Which town?
Hamilton.
Oh, I know some people from Hamilton.
Yeah. I can think of 3 or 4 things right off the top. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. I think this is a good spot to wrap up. And Ian, been awesome to meet you, to get to know you a little bit, to make fun of you a little bit too. I always enjoy that.
Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah. And check out the property assessment service, goodstewards.ca/discover. So until next time, folks.
Steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.